Hi everyone, I'd like to welcome you to today's event, Supporting Families Through Maternity Leave Transitions with Rebecca Grainger, brought to you by The Drop-In. My name's Abby, I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at triiyo, and I'm really excited to have you all here today, along with our very special guest. Thank you for joining us, Rebecca. I thought to start, you could tell us a little bit about yourself and the work that you've done helping families navigate maternity leave and returning to the workforce.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. My background's recruitment. After I became pregnant, I started career coaching women, specifically women transitioning from the professional world, corporate world, into motherhood or into parental leave, and then back into the workplace. And I did that for 5 years, and there were consistently the same issues and problems and concerns and disconnection, which led me to starting triiyo, which is where what we do now, which is essentially a platform that supports organisations to better support their managers and their employees through this this life transition, which is hugely emotional and hugely challenging. Got a lot of experience, both in working one-on-one with women specifically, and also now organisations, and really understanding what their challenges are.
Yeah, awesome. You do have a lot of experience, and we're really excited to hear about that and some of your insights today. We'll hear from Rebecca really shortly. I just wanted to do a little bit of housekeeping first around the event. So we've got a few questions that our community have put forward earlier this week that Rebecca will be answering later on in today's event. But if you do have any questions that come up for you throughout the talk, you can submit them in the Q&A box below, and I'll read them out at the end or potentially throughout the event as they come up. You can choose whether or not you submit those questions anonymously also. There's a chat box as well, which is open for chatting throughout the event with other attendees, but please don't put your questions for Rebecca in here or we may miss them. Use the Q&A box. I'll hand back to Rebecca shortly. Before that though, I did want to briefly tell you a little bit more about the Drop-In Women's Health community. The Drop-In is a place to connect with like-minded women and support each other on your individual health journeys. It's a safe space full of thoughtful, credible information about the health topics that matter to you, brought to you by triiyo's team of expert medical and holistic health specialists. In the Drop-In, you can access fortnightly events such as today's, along with Q&A sessions with expert health specialists. We also run courses on health-related topics such as inflammation, so you're able to make more informed choices about your healthcare. Maintaining a safe space is really important to us, so you can be assured of the privacy that you need, and there's no ads. The Drop-In is a free community, and we've popped a link in the chat box so you can come check it out, and I hope to see you in there. But for now, I'll hand over to today's special guest to talk about maternity leave transitions. Thanks, Rebecca.
Okay, hopefully everyone can see this screen. These are the top tips essentially that I'm going to be talking about today. Now, these are based on the most commonly asked questions from when I was coaching women, and specifically the challenges that both employees and managers have with managing parental leave within organisations. I will attempt to flick back and forward so you're not just looking at a screen, but I'll see how I go with that. So I guess one of the first things would be in terms of talking to your employer. Now, there's no set time that you have to tell your employer that you're expecting a baby, except you do have obligations at 10 weeks and 4 weeks before you intend to take parental leave. We do have a checklist that we're going to be sending out, but essentially at 10 weeks before you intend to take leave, you need to tell your employer of your intention, and then at 4 weeks you need to put that in writing. However, from an employer's point of view, the earlier they know, the better. Obviously, they do need to find a replacement for you. You can make sort of assessments and judgments about whether or not you want to be involved in recruiting that replacement in terms of the handover. So the earlier they know, the more involved you can be. And ideally, the more supportive that employer is going to be. But technically you don't have any obligations to tell them at that sort of 12, 13, 14 week mark. And now with a lot of people working in a far more remote sort of roles, then obviously it's not as evident as it used to be. up until this point in time. Looking at Centrelink entitlements and paid parental leave, we've got a few links coming out to you, but essentially paid parental leave, you need to meet some eligibility requirements. You have to have earned less than 150,000 in the previous year. That's both for yourself and your partner, because there's a partner parental leave too, or dad and partner pay. The amount you get paid is $150.78 a day. You have up to 18 weeks payments. Now, those can be split over 12 weeks within the first 12 months, and the next 30 days can be taken after that for up to the next 24 months, within the next 24 months. So the first 12 weeks have to be taken as a lump sum, as a total period, whereas the other 30 days can be completely flexible. That is a new change, so it's certainly worth knowing about that. And I can see the links have gone up in here. Now, with regards to when you can start the process, you can start that at 3 months out. And it's really worthwhile doing that, because when you've just had a baby, if you are eligible, the last thing you want to be doing with a newborn is sitting in Centrelink. So it's really worthwhile starting that at that sort of 12 weeks before due date, and get all of that paperwork and everything initiated well in advance. Knowing your parental leave, your company's parental leave policy, and government parental leave legislation is also worthwhile. In the pack we're going to send out after this, you will have all the links that you need to research this. Your company's parental leave policy should be available on your intranet. And with that, I would also look into the flexible work policy. Now, there is a Flexible Work Act that your employer has to align to in terms of government legislation, and they may also have their own, or will also have their own, flexible working policy. So it is worth exploring all of those, specifically because at some point you're going to be writing a parental leave plan. So I'm just going to stop sharing so you don't have to look at that the whole time. But essentially, with your parental leave plan, what you're going to be doing is talking to your employer or your manager about your intentions and your expectations. So one of the big areas that people often miss out on because they don't know about it is these 10 keeping in touch days. Now, keeping in touch days are really valuable legislations that you are entitled to work for 10 days. I think it's after 42 days of having your baby, whilst you're on parental leave. It does not affect government parental leave pay or your company's parental leave pay, but it's a fantastic way of staying connected and of keeping in touch. I know one of the questions that we actually had coming up is around this, so I'll refer to that because it's absolutely relevant to now. And the question is, any tips for the best ways to get back into the work mindset upon return? So a few things here. Utilising these keeping in touch days is fantastic. It's going to get you back into work. It's going to get you back in and connected to your team. And one of our tips here is to meet your team and to meet your manager before you return. Within your keeping in touch plan, you will discuss with your manager if you want to be kept in touch with whilst you're on leave. Some people don't. Some new parents just are like, no, I'm out of here. I don't want to speak to you until, you know, a few weeks or a month before I return, and that's absolutely fine. Otherwise, many other new parents do want to maintain that connection. And for many, it's actually really, really important. When I was coaching women, one of the biggest challenges for professional women, when you have a baby, particularly if it's your first baby, you go from having this career, you're completely in control, financially independent, you've got your routine, you can do what you want at the drop of a hat, you can go to meetings, you can stay late from work, you've had your work colleagues that you're completely in touch with on a regular basis, you have your lunch times, etc. And then suddenly you're in this whole new world. Your body's changed, your mind literally changes, you have a brand new baby, which they're learning you, you're learning them. Often we don't know what we're doing, and it's really, really hard. That transition of complete independence and not knowledge and knowing into new motherhood in particular is hugely challenging. When I was coaching, I called it falling off a cliff. It's literally like a rug's been pulled out from under you. Not if there's anyone expecting a baby, I do not want you to worry, but it is super challenging. And therefore, arranging to keep in touch on an ad hoc or a regular monthly basis with your people, your team in work, actually just helps that transition into motherhood. And then it does sort of definitely prepare you to move back into the workplace. Other things in terms of transitioning back and your parental leave plan, like I say, you are going to get a whole template of this in a pack when, you know, at the end of the session. So you talk about your keeping in touch, you talk about your intention. Now, your plan is what you intend to happen or what you think is going to happen. Just be really mindful that this might not go to plan. Things can change both on your employer's situation and on your situation. You may completely feel differently after you've had a baby, and that's completely fine. In both ways, you may expect to have a much longer parental leave and want to return sooner, or vice versa. So just know that whatever you put in that plan is an intention, or, you know, but it is not cast in stone. You can at any point tell your employer and request changes to that. So we're going to talk about childcare in a minute, but in terms of getting into the mindset of returning, I'm just going to put this, share the screen again, because there's a lot of things that we're touching on now. So your 10 keeping in touch days, you're entitled to take those within after 42 days of having a baby throughout your whole parental leave period. It's often really good to start using those in the run up to returning. It's also a great idea if you let your employer know or your manager know if you want to get involved in any projects or anything like that in the run up of, you know, from when you return. In your parental leave plan, also let them know if you want to know about any new opportunities and job roles that arise within the organisation. Abby, are you?
Yeah, Rebecca, I just had a question that I thought was important to clarify at this point around those keeping in touch days. Just to confirm, are these additional to the days that you take in your mat leave, or do they come from there?
No, they're completely additional. A lot of employers actually don't, managers certainly don't know about them, and they're not openly utilised and discussed. But they are a government initiative, and it's an entitlement that everyone is entitled to. So you are paid you're not paid the government parental leave pay rate, you're paid your normal work rate. Now, those keeping in touch days have to be agreed by your manager, and it's typically for whole days, but they could be to attend training, conferences. Certainly they're fantastic to use in the run-up to returning to work. And this aligns very much with one of my other tips, which would be start childcare if you can afford to, certainly a week or two early. It's going to help you and your child in terms of the separation. It is very emotional, certainly that first day of dropping your child into daycare or childcare. And it's certainly easier to do that on a day that you don't have to rush off to work on the very first day. So if you can afford to, truncate your start, utilise these keeping in touch days as a truncated start to return. You can obviously also use your paid parental leave, your flexible days, if you've done your 12 weeks already. So there's multiple ways that you can help yourself have a staggered or truncated start. You can also talk to your manager around working shorter hours for that first week or two, so that you can manage daycare drop-offs and pickups better. But definitely do the trial runs if you can do childcare a week or so earlier, to really just get yourself used to that and your child used to it. It's certainly less of an emotional pull at the time. Other things, coaching. Now we talk about this here, coaching and mentoring to ease your transition back. Coach is a fantastic way of helping you transition from, you know, I'm in my new mum or my new dad mindset, and now I have to go back into work. I'm not completely that professional I was, and I'm now not just this parent that I am. I'm now going to be a working parent. So it's another huge shift and another massive transition back into the workplace. And what comes with that is a whole host of guilt. We are now juggling something completely different to what we ever had to before. We need to manage expectations of our manager, of our colleagues, of the workplace, in terms of, you know, how they see us, how are we going to deliver. It's extremely challenging. So coaches can really help you with that transition. One of the companies we use through triiyo is the Parents Village. They have psychologists and coaches that do specifically help new parents transition into motherhood and parenthood and back into the workplace. So if you can get access to coaches, then use them. Some organisations do also have coaching available for this specific transition, and other organisations have mentors. So you might not get a specific coach, but your organisation might have mentors that can actually help you with these transitions. And it's just great to be able to work with somebody that really has been there and understands and can advise you on how this transition can run a bit more smoothly. I've also got here, obviously, in finding a new job, a lot of what I'm talking about here is returning to your old job or to the same job. And obviously, sometimes we don't. Sometimes we're made redundant on parental leave. And sometimes we don't want to go back to work. Sometimes we leave and we take a period of time out and then we return back into the workforce. Getting a coach to help you find a new job and transition back is an expense, but it's a really valuable investment. What I found when I was coaching is that we really help, I'll just stop sharing again, we really help individuals understand their value. Just because you've been out of work for a period of time, a coach can help upskill you, can identify courses that you need to do, can identify gaps in your skill set, can really boost your confidence, give you direction on how to find a job, where to find a job, those types of things. So coaching is hugely valuable for both of those reasons. Let's have a look. What else are we discussing here? Meeting your team. So in terms of returning to work and getting into the mindset, meeting your team and meeting your manager, even if you can do that on a couple of occasions in the month in the run-up, it really helps just re-establish that glue that keeps teams together. If you haven't kept in contact with your teammates on a regular basis through the time you've been away, certainly having a couple of lunches and meeting your manager to really understand, you know, what's going on in the team. Sometimes your manager changes, sometimes your team changes, offices change, desks change, all of these things can happen in the 6 to 12 months, whatever it's been that you've been off. And so having met everyone before you go back formally on a first day really does help that transition, and just really starts to rebuild that sense of belonging, and sort of, you know, that connection with your teammates. Okay, let's have a look. Okay, so this next one in terms of childcare is quite a emotive and challenging topic for many. It's one that came up frequently in the 5 or so years that I was coaching women. And essentially, childcare should be seen as a family cost. Now, we need to just take away the women that want to take some time out from the workforce. Let's, you know, separate those and look at the women that want to return to work and feel challenged or conflicted because of the cost of childcare, which is extortionate. So if you are one of those women that do want to return but are having the challenging conversations around or the thought process that I'm only going to earn X amount of money if I return once I've paid for childcare, the big thing here is try and establish with your partner that childcare is a family cost. So similar to a mortgage, rent or food, it is a cost that is attributed across the family, not just your individual paid for out of your individual salary. Just because we birth children doesn't mean we are solely responsible for their financial upkeep forevermore, and that certainly does include childcare. The reasons why returning to work, if you want to, as soon as you can, or whenever you want to, from a financial perspective and a career perspective, are really important to note. So you'll get back into your career, you'll be able to continue on your career path if that's what you so choose. You will also start, yes, you will start earning an income, but you will also start putting money away into super. Now, we know that women in their 50s are, have the lowest super contributions now, and are the highest number of homeless people that's happening. And a lot of this is because historically women have stopped working when they've had children, and obviously the gender pay gap, the super gap, all of these things are real and a factor. So the sooner you can get back into work, if that's what you choose, the sooner you'll be putting into your super, the more you'll be benefiting from that compounding effect of your super growing. If you want to take time out of the workforce, then one of the ways that you can help the super contributions is for your partner to increase their payments. Because as a family unit, super is seen as a total family unit. Certainly in the event that there is ever any separation, which is often where women experience the effect of not having that financial security of returning to work. So I guess that's probably one of the biggest things. Happy to talk about more about that as in the sort of questions, but certainly if childcare, the cost of childcare is putting you off because you're seeing it as coming out of your salary, view it as a family cost, and that you've got two salaries coming into the family unit, and therefore it's one of the costs that go out. And I can also say, from the years I was coaching women, those that went back into work, so I helped women find jobs, a lot of them had been out of work, and the positive effects on their relationship was actually quite profound. So when you're in the mum space, and then you get into your workspace, women's confidence actually increased significantly. They had a huge amount of other stuff that they were able to talk about. It wasn't just about the baby or the children. So the broader effects and impact of going back to work certainly has far more reaching effects than just financial, and certainly there was a lot more positive effects both on relationships and on mental health. So on that note, I'll just drop down to the last topic here, and that is mental health. So as I've said, becoming a parent, certainly for the first time, and any time I've only done it once, but the first time was hugely challenging. We know that postnatal depression affects both men and women at significantly high rates, and the sooner that we can identify that things maybe don't feel right and aren't, we're not feeling great about certain things, the sooner that that's identified and we can get support, the better. Panda have fantastic assessments and checklists, both before you become a parent and after, for yourself as the new parent, as a new mother, and as a new father or parent or carer. It's really worth noting and monitoring both yourself and your partner for how their mental health is going. And I think the biggest challenge is knowing what is normal about being a new parent, what is just down to sort of the sleep deprivation because it's a really real painful thing, or what is something I might need a little bit of extra support. So these checklists and assessments that Panda have, which are completely free and available on their websites, are great ways just to check in on how am I feeling, is this normal, do I need to get support, and the sooner you can get support, the better. One of the other ways that you can get support if you're still in employment, so on maternity leave from your employer, is through their EAP, so the Employee Assistance Programme. Every employer will have one. And within that, you are eligible for a whole host of support, but psychologists and mental health support through there. So have a look at these assessments, and don't be afraid to reach out to somebody to get support if at any point your things aren't feeling right. So I think that's probably the areas that I really wanted to talk on. But very happy to take any questions on any of the areas that we've spoken about, or anything else that I haven't covered.
Thank you, Rebecca. That was really incredibly insightful and so informative. And I really thank you for all the different resources and links that you've shared with us prior, that we've popped in the chat box. And we will be sharing those with the community, along with some of those other resources that you've pulled together for us in an email after the event. But we did have some questions that were submitted from our community earlier this week, so I might run through those with you now. And as Rebecca said, if you do have any questions and you'd like to ask them of her, now is the time. Please pop them in the chat, in the Q&A box. In terms of the links, they are in the chat box. But if someone has mentioned that they're having some issues seeing those, so have a look in the chat box. If you can't see them, let us know. And like I said, we'll be sending them out afterwards as well, so you won't miss out on those. Now, for the first question, it was around how to ask for job share or a part-time situation on returning to work. Do you have any thoughts on that, Rebecca?
Yeah. So the sooner you talk to your employer or your manager about this, the better. There is the Flexible Work Act, so legally they have to abide by certain legislation, and your company will have a flexible work policy anyway. So depending on what you mean by job share, by part-time or flexible working, will be sort of dependent on legislation and what can be managed by your employer. The most simplest way is open up the conversation with your manager. There is a formal letter which is going to come out to you, if you can access the links, that Fair Work recommend. They actually give you a template, so you can follow that template. It's really, really simple, about sort of requesting flexibility or part-time on your return to work. But I guess it's a balance between what you can manage, going into those conversations knowing what your parameters, what your boundaries are, what you can and can't manage, and what you can be flexible on. Maybe you could do a 4-day, a 9-day fortnight, or a 4-day week, but over full time. Maybe somebody who can do a job share with you. I think job sharing is fantastic. So maybe, there's other people within your team or your division that you can talk to about that. But the first thing is really to start that conversation with your manager around, what it is that you're looking for and what you need. The other things when you are returning to work is to have those conversations around breastfeeding. Are there, assessments in place for that? Communicate your expectations very early around your hours and your hours and the days that you can work. If you need to take, I know one of the questions is around taking time off sick, know that you can sort of potentially trade time in lieu, or you do have your flexible 30 days if you've only taken your 12 weeks. Maybe you can access some annual leave days. So there's ways that you can. It depends if you want part-time long-term, or is it part-time for a short period of time to help your transition back. So just be really clear on what you want, and have some sort of parameters around, what are non-negotiable and what is a bit more negotiable, or where can I be flexible on that. So it's really difficult to give you a fixed answer, but to start the conversations early.
It's a great general answer. And I think, it obviously changes between what companies are obligated legally to do and then what they also offer. I've heard of some companies that offer a breast milk courier service for their female employees who may be needing to express milk at work. And home to babies. So that's one great example of something that could potentially be on offer for an employee.
Yeah, and times have changed a lot since COVID. Obviously, you know, the ability to work from home has now been, you know, it's just happened, right? It happened overnight. So, you know, it's hard for employers. Certainly there may be some roles that people can't work from home. But typically if they're office based and they can, then it's a lot easier now to push back on employers and really sort of negotiate on that.
It's perhaps a silver lining for
Yeah,
parents in some ways. Being
yeah.
into Zoom
Although
calls.
working from home with a child or a baby is also incredibly difficult, as we've all experienced.
We have. It was interesting actually just then when you touched on sick days, because I think that's one shock that I had in terms of going back to work was, you know, my own sick days and then the sick days I needed to take when I had a sick child as
Yeah.
well. And
Yeah. Look, I mean, we do have that as a question. So, you know, let's talk around that. You know, you do have carers leave days that you can take off. You could also take annual leave days. You can ask to work from home, and, you know, make up your hours or ensure your work's done, you know, outside of the typical working day, which I don't really think exists anymore anyway. If you're in an office, some offices have childcare facilities, and do allow you to bring children into work, obviously depending on how sick they are. You know, maybe taking the time off and then making up your hours on other days. A lot of this is really dependent on the organisation and your manager. But children get sick. This is, you know, this is a fact of life. I think the other area that, you know, women need to be better at doing is roping in their partner to take, you know, to share the load of caring for sick children. Obviously, because men typically earn more, they sort of, their careers are, you know, sort of given the gold star, and women's careers are normally secondary. But we will never sort of drive this parental leave equality if we don't start, you know, asking our partners to shoulder some of the caring responsibilities equally with us, so that we're not always the one to, you know, have to deal with the guilt and, you know, ask our managers for the time off work.
yeah, and that's completely reasonable, but it's always so great to have that reminder. So we had an interesting question around what happens if my manager leaves while I'm on maternity leave. You know, people can
Yeah,
in a relationship and then they're coming back into someone new. Can you talk us through
yeah.
your experience with that?
Yeah, this is really a common one that we address with the triiyo platform. Actually, in an ideal world, the manager will sort of hand over you to their replacement. Will let you know. Ideally, you will have some form of meeting or introduction with them, even if you're on leave, if that's what if that's what you'd like, which would be great. But often, you know, you do come back to the workplace, no one's spoken to you, and your desk has moved, the office has changed, your computer's not working, and, you know, half your team's different. So it's incredibly challenging, and hence why keeping in touch and having, you know, utilising those 10 keeping in touch days to return is really beneficial. But if that happens and you know, you don't know about it, or as soon as you return, have a meeting with your manager, establish what, you know, they're there to do, what are their, you know, goals and strategies, and what are they looking to achieve, where do they see you fitting within, you know, within the team. You do have every right to go back to your same job, but really trying to understand, you know, what have they been brought in to do, and where do they see you fitting within that team. So yeah, I mean, ideally you'll know at the time when it happens, and if you are in contact with your colleagues whilst you're away, then you will get the heads up of all of this happening. So it certainly makes that transition back, and you know, the volume of change is easier to cope with.
Less surprises.
Yes, which always helps.
Now, I think this question has come from someone who is coming back into work and not returning to the same role. In terms of looking at jobs that suit their skill set, but they're advertised as full-time only.
Yeah.
Any tips for what to do here?
Yeah, definitely still apply. So my question would be, are the roles advertised through a recruiter or are they advertised directly? If they're with a recruiter, meet the recruiter, get them to buy into you. You know, as recruiters, we very much control the shortlist. It's in our interest to place a candidate. They will be able to give you feedback on your CV, any gaps on your CV, what is the client looking for, what is the client's culture like, you know, what is the team like, do they have people working part-time, is it a flexible environment, all of those things. Once you've established all of that, then it's much easier to make the judgment call of whether or not the client or that job is going to have an option of being flexible or part-time. So definitely always apply. If it's through a recruiter, make sure you have those conversations up front. And let them know what you're looking for. Let them know, again, what are your parameters? What can you negotiate on? How long do you want things to be part-time for? Because often we are sort of for 6 months, and then I'll be able to up it, you know, from 3 days to 4 days or to 5 days, whatever it is. So if you're the right person for the job, often you can get recruiters to get on your side and to still put you forward. If it's directly through an employer, definitely still apply. It's really up to you, and there's no fixed way, right or wrong, whether you let them know up front that you want part-time work or not. I would still say definitely apply. I would try and get to an interview before you bring up this conversation, because again, if you're the right person for the job, companies can often be flexible. And often if this job is amazing and it's your dream job, there is also some flexibility often on our part. So I would always say go for it, but certainly after a first interview, depending on what the outcomes are of that, you definitely before the second, let them know of your intention around what you need in terms of hours or flexibility. No employer loves a surprise at the end of a process. If they're coming to offer you what was advertised as a full-time job, and then you turn around and say, that's great, but I want 3 days.
Yeah, timing is key by the sounds of it.
Yeah.
We've had a question come through, which I love. It's a bit of a curveball, or more of a challenging question, I think. But we've had a question around any thoughts on applying for a different role within the same organisation whilst on parental leave?
Yeah, absolutely, go for it. Definitely, 100% yes. So in your parental leave plan, I would always encourage you to discuss with your manager at the time, you know, that you want to be considered for any roles that open up within that team or anywhere else in the business. Make it clear where you see your career progression going. Make sure you're on however your organisation does it, so that you're on the distribution lists around, or you know, you maintain access to the internet, or however they work it, so that you can see these jobs. But absolutely go for it. There is no reason why you shouldn't. And there are some really progressive employers that will promote people whilst they're pregnant, on leave, and on their return. So particularly, you know, being a woman, there is a huge amount of push for diverse organisations and to be seen as inclusive. So organisations and employers are really upping their game on this. So definitely apply. And even if you don't get this one, you've set the standard, you've made it really known that you expect your career to progress. So it then opens doors around having those career progression conversations internally, sort of much sooner than perhaps a manager may start those conversations. So yes, do it.
That's such great advice. Thank you. Go for it, in other words. So we've got a couple of minutes left. If there's any more questions, feel free to pop them in the Q&A box. I'll give you a moment to do that. We have had some great questions come through so far. And just a reminder, we've put those links again in the chat. Apologies if you couldn't see them previously, but as I've mentioned before, we'll be sending them out. I think that might be all the questions that we have for today. So Rebecca, thank you so much. We really appreciate your time today and the important work that you do supporting families, and just the level of insight and resources that you've shared with us so generously today. I'd also like to thank all of our lovely attendees for their time and questions today. We've popped Rebecca's social handles in the chat box so that you can follow the amazing work that she's doing with triiyo. And as promised, I've also popped a link in the group chat box to check out the drop-in community, where we'll be playing the webinar replay in full in the coming days, and continuing the conversation around maternity leave transitions. So keep an eye out for that email as well, that will have the information around the parental leave pack that Rebecca's really kindly put together for today's attendees. But that's it. Thank you, everyone. And thank you so much, Rebecca. It's been amazing having you today.